What do you miss about the pandemic? Story 1. The pace of life almost felt like how life should be. Less traffic, less crowded streets, less noise, more time to appreciate people at home. Some jobs could commute. Even people who had a variety of opinions on the pandemic details seem to have a community of sorts within their said beliefs. It just feels modern society is chaotic for no good reason, and the pandemic slowed things down for a short minute. Story 2, clean supermarket baskets. Actually just clean stuff in general. The moment it was no longer mandated, everything went back to being filthy. You would think there would be minimum standards of hygiene in places that sell produce. I mean, I'm pretty sure a corner grocer would get in trouble for having baskets as gross as Woolworth's baskets always are. Story 3, I live in Yosemite National Park. No visitors were allowed in during the initial lockdown, so it was only the employees who lived in the park that got to enjoy spring that year. No one on the mist trail on a fine spring day in May. No cars at Tunnel View for sunrise. No Gumbies at Swan Slab. No careless influencers trampling the meadows. The birds were loud. The bears were comfortable. The dogwood blooms didn't get picked and ruined. I miss that. I miss having the valley to myself. It's so selfish. But man, what an experience. Story 4. Not getting sick, feeling like nobody cared about my immunosuppression. I have been on an immunosuppressive drug to control my ankylosing spondylitis since I was 18. I am supposed to skip doses while unwell. During COVID, it was finally normal to take precautions like wearing a medical mask in public and not being forced to attend crowded work meetings where half the people are hacking and coughing. I literally didn't get sick once in 2 years until being forced to return to office and then getting COVID within 2 weeks. Wouldn't you know, skipping a few doses every 1 to 2 months due to getting sick actually had a huge impact on my quality of life. During COVID, I had 0 flare-ups, while pre- and post-COVID, I've had several scary flare-up episodes causing weeks of agonizing pain. It was also nice that people pretended to care about immunocompromised folks. My friends would go out of their way to cancel plans if they felt unwell. Just 2 months ago, we were hanging out with some fairly close friends, and 2 hours in, one of them admitted, "Oh, I've had a fever for 3 days, but I thought I could tough it out with Advil." And sure enough, a few days later, I got sick. I totally sympathize with all of the horrible downsides of the pandemic, but it was basically the only time I was able to get an upper hand on my chronic disease and not feel pressured by society to just suck it up and deal with communicable diseases. Story 5, nothing. I was in charge of safety for an essential public service. We were told we weren't allowed to close down, but also got 0 assistance in obtaining PPE, relief workers, childcare, or priority status for vaccinations. I was constantly dealing with angry, irrational members of the public, anxious, depressed, angry coworkers. I had 0 medical or public health training, but I had to write safety protocols and make decisions knowing that if I made a mistake, lots of people might die. Because of staff shortages, I had to do my regular full-time job, plus all the additional work of managing COVID safety, plus take over another department's work, normally done by 3 full-time employees. I didn't get paid any extra, but I was told to do all my paperwork at home, which was awful since I shared a tiny apartment with 2 roommates and literally didn't even have a desk at home. 4 months into lockdown, my cat got cancer and died. Then I had to help evacuate my grandmother and cousins from a wildfire. Oh, and my doctor retired, so I couldn't get my medication refilled for about a year. Story 6. The fat check I got at the end of it, after having gotten furloughed from my job and not collecting the pay, bi-weekly or even monthly, but collecting it all at once when lockdown was over. Other than that, I was mentally hanging on by a string. I legitimately felt like the world would never be the same again, like it was ending. Life had a very anxious feel for me existentially. For that, I don't know how some of you were at so much peace. Story 7, masks. I want masks to be a normal occurrence when people are sick, but everyone raises hell when I throw one on at work or in the grocery store. Are you sick? No, but you fuckers are coughing and sneezing without covering your mouth. Personal space. I want 6 feet between me and strangers' back. People breathe down my neck in line. It's absolutely disgusting. It's like they were so neglected for physical closeness during that time span that they're twice as bad now that it's not a requirement. Story 8. Being able to wear a mask in public without being harassed for it. But that's it. I was an essential worker in NYC. Unless you were there, you can never understand. And I wasn't even in healthcare. The people I know who were have never been the same. They've seen shit no one should ever have to. Made decisions no one should have to. I have a friend who was widowed in her early 40s. Nearly every person I know either knows someone who died of COVID or has someone close to them who lost someone to COVID. I have friends still disabled by the long COVID they got in 2020. Friends who were in their mid-20s and physically fit who had insane breathing issues for years post-infection. I know people who still haven't fiscally recovered due to business loss they suffered in 2020, 2021. I miss remembering what it was like in the past and having hope it would get better, that things would go back to normal and that it would end. I miss having hopes and dreams for my future that COVID made fairly unreachable. I miss my pre-COVID body that was far less chronically unwell than the one I have now. Also, as a reminder, the pandemic isn't over. Cases are as high as ever, people aren't testing or masking when they're sick, and since there's no longer any comp pay or government subsidies, there's nothing to help stop the spread. Not that people care. Story 9, I love this question, because other than no income, I loved the shutdown. I loved not feeling obligated to go to social things. I loved not panicking when I had insomnia because I wasn't required to keep appointments. I could make up the sleep with no negative consequences. I loved, most of all, the feeling of bonding. People bought from mom and pop stores and restaurants, money or not, because they wanted to help the other person have an income. I loved artists doing free concerts on YouTube or Facebook, sometimes with band members all signing in from remote locations. I loved things like Australians wearing costumes to take out the garbage, or neighborhood karaoke nights from porches, or a few people taking the time to write letters. I loved the sense of humor about it and the memes that went around. I loved televisits with doctors. I loved everyone saying, "Stay safe," instead of "goodbye." I feel like Americans are at their best during a common crisis. I don't miss the code purples in hospitals. I don't miss the rallies by people who weren't going to let anyone tell them to use common sense that spread and mutated the virus. And selfishly, I don't miss nail salons being closed. Story 10. I don't like telling people, but it was one of the best times of my life. Spent so much time with my family, my kids. We called the first lockdown Endless Summer, because we just hung out with our kids at our parents' pool every day. It was nice. Spent time doing family stuff constantly since we were all in the same bubble. My kids spent so much time with their grandparents, and I know they look back at it fondly now that we and their grandparents have gone back to the fast-paced life of work and school. Lockdown made us feel like people again. We could just casually be alive. We reconnected, and when the lockdowns ended, we went back to normal life like everyone else. It was an awful time. People died, and a lot of people were scared. The unknowns were terrifying, and people struggled without work. So I feel really bad sometimes about how good it was for us. I think we were just lucky to have not been affected. We live rural outside of a really small town. Crazy to say, but I miss all the time I was spending with my kids. I had a son during COVID, and I spent the entire first 2 years of his life with him every single day. I didn't get that luxury with my other kids. Overall, I just miss all the free time to spend time with family, who also had all the free time to spend with us. Story 11. The bullies at my workplace couldn't do their thing. We were all working from home, and when we had to do anything on Zoom, it was all recorded, which is a bully's nightmare. They couldn't corner anyone in the break room. They couldn't help themselves to someone else's lunch. They couldn't alleviate their boredom by making someone else feel uncomfortable. Poor souls. The only thing they could do was their actual job. Story 12. My grandmother broke her wrist in February. Before the pandemic, I agreed to go and somewhat with her, with my son, and take care of her. It was a bumpy ride. Dementia is crazy, but I actually got to hear some stories that I did not know about my grandmother's life. Maybe she made them up, I don't know, but I got to spend time with her. Unfortunately, I was an essential employee and I still had to work, but I will never forget what she did for me, or my mother. And my grandmother was the head nurse. She still has people that know her in the industry today. She used to run the ER, and she was absolutely trying to do that at the hospice care that we had to put her in because she was an escape risk. But the pandemic was an opportunity to spend the extra time, but also learn how to keep everything from work outside and not bring it into my house. Story 13. Just the lack of expectations. You weren't expected to go places and do things. You weren't expected to be productive when working from home. You weren't expected to have your shit together. It felt more like living as we should, without the crippling weight of constant production and social norms. People I rarely hear from now because they're so busy, we're just vibing at home, baking, doing art, playing Animal Crossing, going out for their daily walk. And I actually enjoyed the Zoom calls with family, friends, just for the heck of it. I was more connected to people then than I am now. It was proof to me that as a society, species, we're all just too busy all the time. Story 14. Lockdown came during the last quarter of senior year. I feel selfish saying it was the best time of my life. In mid-February, I started dating this girl, my first girlfriend. So we spent almost every day together, and it was in that sweet honeymoon phase where you can't get enough of each other. We worked together, we had the same friends, we did a lot of other stuff. Couple that with a 6-month summer vacation, and my job was deemed essential, so I was working overtime and making more money than I knew how to spend. There was no curfew, because my parents didn't worry about idiots being out around town. I worked at a DQ with a bunch of high school friends. We went out until midnight every night after work. We had no responsibilities, all the money we needed, time, and everyone we knew was a 10-minute car ride away. I wish I was bright enough to know how good I had it.